Big weekend at the NFL Combine for the Saints. It starts with Ashton Jeanty and the running backs, continues on through wide receivers, quarterbacks, and offensive linemen. We're here to break it down. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. Look, running backs at the Combine, I think they start with Ashton Jeanty, obviously. And then you've got a large group of guys that I think are going to be pretty good running backs. I kind of equate this to putting it in recent Saints terms, late teens, Ingram and Kamara. When we were running those two out of the backfield, Ingram is a very good NFL running back, type of running back everybody loves having on their roster. But Kamara was better. Kamara was special. And looking at this draft, I think it's very, very deep with Ingram's, which is good for the Saints. But I think Jeanty might be the closest thing to Kamara, that true impact running back. If he's there at 9, he should be a heavy consideration for the Saints, especially when you have a new head coach coming in, talking a lot about the run and just winning a Super Bowl being very run heavy. You look at Jeanty, 21 years old, 5'9", 215 is a little small, might be somewhat of a concern. Played at Boise State. There's also the concern about how much high-level competition did he play against. This past season, he played against Oregon. He played against Penn State. Had a very good game against Oregon. Penn State was a little rough, but that was a really, really good defense. But when you look at him overall in 2025, he total yards, rushing and receiving, he ran for 2,500 alone. But in his total combined yards, 1,970 of those yards were after first contact. He forced 152 missed tackles, 36 explosive runs, which are basically 15 yards or longer. And he ran in Boise. He ran both in a system that employed gap and zone, which is another thing that Kellen Moore has talked about. So overall, there's a lot of like about this guy. My one major concern in his 3 years at Boise, he averaged 277 touches roughly a year, which is an awful lot over a 13-game, basically, college season. A couple of extra games, or an extra game because they made the college playoffs in 2024. And I think earlier I gave his stats as 2025. I meant 2024. But in 2024, he finished with 398 total touches, rushing and receiving, nearly 400. Awful lot. That may be a red flag. I don't know how much of a concern it is. But when you're talking about number 9, you want somebody that's running backs only have a certain number of touches in their body. Nobody knows what that number is until they actually hit it. But overall, I've seen people when they talked about him comp him directly to Alvin Kamara. And I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm not saying it's 100% true, but it's definitely worth the conversation at 9 for the Saints. So I think until something proves either the combine or in the pre-draft process that red flags him, I think he's a Kamara, a step above a lot of Ingrams. And let's talk about the Ingrams because this running back class, somebody said that if you're looking for some type of running back for your NFL team that can play on Sundays, you can find it somewhere in this draft. A lot of people said this is the deepest running back draft in a while. And again, maybe not the total top end Camaro-like talent, but a lot of Ingrams. After Jeanty, you've got Hampton at North Carolina, Scatterboo at Arizona State, Sampson at Tennessee, Johnson at Iowa, the Ohio State duo of Henderson and Judkins, who kind of cannibalized each other in Ohio State. And a lot of people, I know Reggie Bush was one of them because I saw him in an interview saying people confuse the fact that Ohio State used them both tremendously to win the national championship, that they're both standalone, just as special running backs as a lot of the other guys on this list. And they may even, once they can get into the pre-draft process of the combine and pro days and all, separate themselves as not as a combo backfield, but as two true ones that just happen to be playing for an incredible team at the same time. Outside of Jenny, nobody is a definite first rounder, but Hampton and Johnson both have been projected or mocked at times into the first round, but almost all of these guys, again, as long as nothing pops up to red flag them, this trend in the NFL of running the ball because the downfield passing just isn't there like it was 5, 10 years ago, but the running game is coming back. Putting all these guys day 2 picks, pretty much. And then we're not even getting to the guys that are the day 3 picks. And if you remember last year, there was a run of day 3 picks. Some of them, like Ray Davis in Buffalo, Garendo in Frisco, some of them saw some considerable playing time during last year as rookies and played pretty well. And you got another group that's looking like it's sitting in there this year, but Harvey at Central Florida from Central Florida, Neal from Kansas, Giddens from Kansas State, Blue from Texas, Martinez from Miami, Hunter from Auburn, ATN from Georgia. So he had a really good college career, and they're talking about he may not crack the draft until day 3 somewhere in round 4 or 5. Gordon, Oregon State, James at Oregon. I'm sorry, Gordon for Oklahoma State. This is a healthy bunch of running backs, and there's even some guys, they call them the small school guys. One that a lot of people are talking about is Yarns from Delaware. Saying, man, he's draftable and could has a floor in the NFL. And what they talk about a lot of these guys is an unknown ceiling. The separation on these guys is size. What are their, speed, RES scores, all that stuff. What is it really going to turn out to? What, once we get them off of film, which is a lot of this is what's based on, get them into the measurables, do they have everything we need? But the general rule of thought is all these guys have enough of what we need that we will draft them. They'll likely make an NFL roster. And while it may not be a huge impact, they'll likely, at the very least, give you solid production in a backup or a committee backfield role. This is an area where if Jeanty turns out to be some type of generational running back, like an Alvin Kamara, I think you got to take him at 9. If not, you still have to look at your depth chart and realize you probably need to find one of these guys somewhere in the draft, depending on how your draft board shakes out if you're the Saints, because your draft board is kind of confusing because you need so much in young talent. But when you're looking at Kamara, he's getting up there in age and developing a little bit, nothing serious, but a little injury issue, just I think mostly because he's getting up there in age. Miller has definitely had injury question marks. Jamal Williams is done. It's time for the Saints to recognize that. He has cap savings this year as a veteran cut, actually creates cap space for us. I don't see how he's on the roster. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is looking to get his career back on track. So adding one of these young running backs kind of makes sense as a backup if it isn't like a Jeanty where we're going, hey, we think he's the future and we're going to take him at 9. So nowhere near is this a position of need for the Saints. I think you're capable with some running backs already there. As long as they can stay healthy and productive, you're okay. But you have an opportunity to start injecting some talented youth behind those guys, or hell, maybe grab a guy that comes in and takes the job himself and does everything that Kellen Moore wants his backfield to do in this new offense he's trying to build. What flavor do you want at wide receiver? Because basically it's kind of like the old Baskin Robbins 31 flavors. Whatever you want, it's probably in this draft somewhere. You kind of maybe looking at it in more or less 3 type categories, although that even may be oversimplifying it. You have a pretty decent group of a big body, physical wide receivers, contested catch type guys, abilities to get downfield and make catches. Some pretty good route runners in this group. But McMillan in Arizona, Higgins at Iowa State, Williams at TCU, Bryant from Illinois, all kind of fit in that area. You have another group that maybe not quite as big physical, but with a little more size to them than your kind of traditional prototype wide receivers you see around the NFL. But still physical enough, and a lot of these guys, especially the first one, Bash at TCU, can really go get the ball, and they're really good route runners. But you also put Stanford's Manor in that line, in that group, and Trey Harris from Ole Miss, just to name a couple. And then, like we're saying, the more like the Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed type receivers, those 6 foot guys, right around 200 types. Uh, Burden, Missouri; Ibuka, Ohio State; Golden, Texas; Restrepo, Miami; Royals, Utah State; Johnson, Oregon; Noel, Iowa State; Williams, Washington State. You have a tremendous amount of options there. Most of those guys, they may be a little shorter, a little lighter, depending on which ones you're looking at, but they all kind of fall in that category, and they're all going to bring some type of explosiveness, speed, agility, good route running, good hands, yards after the catch ability. And when you talk about these three groups, like I said, it's probably oversimplified. You get crossover in all these categories from one to the other. You may not have very many guys that do it all. And I don't really know if anybody so far has kind of labeled as the guy in this draft class. Early on, it was McMillan in Arizona, and some talk, he's there at 9 that the Saints may take him, and they may do it anyway. But there's a lot to choose from here. I have seen mocks all over the place, which ones go in the first, in the second, in the third. But these group of names right here that I just ran out to you, and there's more. This is also, much like running back, a very deep class with, as they say, the floor is NFL level talent, can play on Sundays, can contribute, can make your roster, may or may not be a superstar, but there's almost no doubt some superstars in here somewhere. There almost always is when you get a class of wide receivers this deep. For the Saints draft board, this is more of a question of Olave and Shaheed. Because first off, they're both in the last year of their contracts. What's your plans going forward with those two guys is going to dictate a lot how you look at this. Your draft board is going to look at this list of rather long 15 or so names I just rattled off. So by the time the draft rolls around, you may have a much clearer picture of what they're looking for. Because it basically boils down to, if we commit to both of those guys for any number of years, then you're probably looking in that, and that's where McMillan may come into play. And you say, we're going to put that third receiver in there. I don't know. But even not, Higgins or Williams or Bryant somewhere a little late in the draft might make sense. Now we've got a bigger body receiver to go with our two quote unquote prototype guys. Or even a Besh or a Harris or one of those guys fits in there. You may decide that, look, we keep one because they both got some injury history kind of packed up with them, and it's conceivable they could both be expensive to keep. And here we go again, if we're not careful of contracts there, where you may go, well, we'll ride one out, the other one may walk in free agency. If a trade opportunity opens up, they may be open to it, knowing, hey, if we lose one, we can add a Burden or a Restrepo or a Golden or one of those guys to replace him. And we might even be able to do that at 40 instead of 9. To options here. Like I said, this is definitely 31 flavors of wide receiver. This is going to be an area of need for the Saints. And I think a lot of people address that based on the fact that, and another thing to look at that I should have mentioned is, if we go ahead and would take Warren at first, that kind of maybe take some of that need for a bigger physical receiver, take it down a notch, and then that would also shift your draft board at that point. So this one is one I think is could be an evolving story over the next couple of weeks as we get to the point where we have to be under the cap for March 12th, and how that's going to shake out with contracts with these two receivers, meaning Olave and Shaheed, how all that's going to work out. Somebody moves, or the Saints give an indication, we're going to be moving on from one, that changes the draft board. So definitely something we're going to have to keep a close eye on, because not only what you're going to do with your top two, but after the top two, Cedric Wilson, I don't think makes this roster. He's another veteran that I just don't think's worked out. You cut him, you save money against the cap. After that, you have a bunch of young guys, and I don't think any of them you can truly rely on, although some of them, Austin Jr. means at times flashed a little bit. And there's always the possibility that when they said we're going to be active in free agency, one of those activities may be trying to bring MVS back as wide receiver 3. It's limitless possibilities, but what's important to the Saints rolling into Saturday in the combine when the receivers go is they need to nail down this draft board, because I cannot see us leaving the draft in April without having one of these guys. It's probably somewhere in the second day, maybe even in the third round, you can find one. But adding one of these guys to the roster, I think that's truly one of the big needs for the Saints. You got to put the depth in there. You got to put some young guys in there. And it has to complement if you plan on keeping what you already have, or replace if you're planning on moving on somewhat from what you have. The other, and this one's going to be real quick, especially in light of the news that Carr is coming back. Quarterbacks finish up Saturday at the combine. I don't have much of an opinion on this one way or the other. I'm still sticking to this is one of the least hyped quarterback classes that I can ever remember, which to me is that's a red flag in of itself, and warning bells going on. If you're committing to Carr like they're claiming they are, I don't see how you pull in Atlanta and take one of these guys at 9, because I like Michael Penix, and as much as that was a head-scratching move, it may work out for him. But even if Cam Ward or Shadir Sanders falls all the way to 9, I don't know if they're Penix. I don't think they're going to make it from what it sounds like anyway. And the other thing that kind of turns me on this class is it's not so much talking about how good guys are. It's probably the biggest thing that is talked about is, well, who's the number 3 that can come in behind the top 2? Is it Jackson Dart? It was supposed to be Milroe. He didn't show out at senior week or Senior Bowl week like everybody was expecting. Dart kind of did. You get Gabriel milling around. And I just keep looking at these names and the way they're talking about them. And I wonder if Spencer Rattler had stayed at school another year and he was in this year's draft, if Spencer Rattler's name wouldn't be right next to Milroe and Dart and Gabriel and all those guys if they're trying to figure out who's the third best guy. Just Rattler came out in a class where they had really 5 top talent guys that all ended up going in the first round and regulated him back. But talent-wise, ability-wise, I don't know if they're as good, better, or worse than he is, but I feel like he would be in the conversation with them. So I don't see the Saints taking a real hard look here. Maybe later on, maybe a Gabriel or a Milroe or a Dart falls and they go much like Rattler did, and they go, okay, let's go ahead and grab him because we think there's some value there. And if you do that, then you're definitely sending the signal we're giving up on Haener and Rattler, which bringing back Carr may have already sent that signal. It's a big, giant mess, and I don't even know how this plays into how you are going to evaluate your quarterbacks or what you're going to do in the draft of the quarterback position, much less what the combine is going to tell you and be able to answer questions for you on your draft board. So let's save the biggest unknown for last. Apparently the NFL did, because the only thing going on Sunday is the offensive lineman. That wraps up the combine. And fundamentally, the problem isn't who's pretty good offensive lineman and probably draft worthy at certain spots. It's nobody seems to be able to make up their mind projecting, especially the offensive, almost specifically the offensive tackles. Are they actually going to play tackle or on the inside in the NFL? And it starts right off the bat with 2 of the top 3 guys being Campbell from LSU and Banks from Texas. And I have seen conflicting analysis where they're doubting and I'm not making this up. I saw this on PFF, that both of them may have arm length less than, I think it's 33 inches, like 32 and 5/8 or whatever. They're too short to play tackle, and they may actually get kicked inside to guard. And they're going to measure the arm length in Sunday, because this article was kind of even talking about how important that was. I'll take their word for it. But at the same time, Teron Armstead is retiring apparently from Miami, and McDaniel's talking about, man, I'd love the Banks guy from Texas. If he's there, I can envision him being our starting left tackle next year. Simmons is from Ohio State is typically in the top three, and some have even said, I believe Mel Kiper was one of them, said he's the best of the three, of the supposed top three, but was injured at Ohio State in October and lost for the rest of the year. They moved their left guard, Donovan Jackson, the left tackle. He finished out the year. He's another one that everybody is thinking is going to move back to guard. But yet in some places I'm seeing him going, well, he looked pretty good at tackle. He may stay there. So projecting who's going to play where seems to be a bit of an issue regarding tackles and how they're going to play out. The inside guys seem to be inside guys. Booker from Alabama seems to be the top guy. I have seen him anywhere mocked or analyzed from somewhere in the first to into the second. Zabel, there's a tackle from North Dakota State who everybody projected was going to play on the inside, showed up at Senior Bowl week, and Mobile did exactly that, apparently dominated, and a lot of people labeled him the biggest winner there, going, yeah, he's definitely an NFL guard, and he can play there. So if you're the Saints kind of making the draft board, I guess that's what you're kind of looking at, and why Sunday's so important is, the Ormland thing is, and I'm not saying it's not a real thing, it's just, one of the things that sounds absurd, but maybe there's a lot of relative basis in it. I don't know. But things like that shaping their draft board because, well, who's going to be on the inside? Who's going to be on the outside? More importantly, and I think this is where the bigger play comes in. You're looking at the Saints offensive line on paper right now. McCoy at center, Ruiz at right guard are probably set. Seem like pretty safe bets. But, we don't really know what the new coaching staff is viewing any of this. But the question mark, Flog, I think, has proven he's an NFL talent offensive lineman and worth the pick where we took him last year. But is the question whether or not he's going to play left tackle in the NFL for the rest of his career settled yet? And how does the new coaching staff view that? Penning, right tackle last year, exceeded my expectations by a lot. I'm going to be honest. But is he your future? Is he a future at tackle? Is he a guy you think about kicking into guard? There's a lot of talk of that when he was originally coming out in the draft years ago, where a lot of people, just like we were talking about some of these tackles, were saying the same thing about him. It's like, he's raw, but he should be able to play guard in the NFL. And his run blocking grade for PFF last year was pretty good. So where does he fit in all this? And, oh, by the way, this is the last year of his contract. So are we even planning on keeping him around after 2025? Left guard, Saldivari, after 2 years, you still don't know what you have in him. I think the overall, it just the expectations from some very brief stretches of time in 2024, I should say the offensive line exceeded what we expected, but it wasn't consistent. It definitely wasn't for the whole season. And there were times where they underperformed. Sometimes that was with the issues and the injury issues and all we had going on in center. But quite honestly, sometimes it was when we had McGovern and McCoy back in there at center. It's just a very hit or miss thing. Overall, I think everybody expected them to have the worst offensive line in the league, and I don't think they were anywhere near the best. But they definitely weren't the worst. This is an area of need in my mind, 100%. If for no other reason, you need to figure out a way to inject better talent, younger talent, while you're at it, if it's coming out of the draft. It helps solidify, start solidifying back some spots on that line that Fuaga is our fill in the blank, left tackle, right tackle, wherever he's going to. That's the guy we've got for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever. We're going to let McCoy, as long as he can stay healthy, we've got him for 3 more years at center. There's 2 of your 5. Start filling in the gaps. If these are the 5 that the coaching staff thinks goes, hey, wait a minute, that was only 1 year with a new system coming in, give us a chance to work with them more. The reputation of I'm going to tailor my scheme and my play calling down to what's available. If he can do that to the offensive line, these are the 5 they want to go with. Fine and dandy. You still need depth. You still need to get ready for when you lose people and have somebody out there that and not pulling like we tried last year, veteran, basically cheaper offensive linemen trying to fill in the gaps, and didn't really work out well like we needed it to from the depth side. I think you need a combination of both. You need to bring in some young talent as depth, and then, yes, go ahead and sign one of those two guys, because look at our roster. We have no depth of offensive line right now. And again, being active in free agency may mean bringing some guys back like Landon Young, who are currently free agents, and getting them back on the roster. Young did a pretty credible job at times filling in at both tackle and guard last year. But overall, when you're looking at this, Campbell, Banks, Simmons at tackle. Mabau from Missouri is another good one. It's right tackle. Didn't give up a sack last year for Missouri. And then I see something on a mock draft the other day where somebody's projecting him to play inside as a guard. Connerly for Oregon, exact same thing. Ursery from Minnesota. Williams, the right tackle for Texas. Trapillo for Boston College. Milan for West Virginia, another right tackle that did not give up a sack last year in college. On the interior side, the guards, Rutledge from Georgia, Lampkin from North Carolina, Kandra from Cincinnati, who I did see something this morning in Pro Football Focus. He had one of the best pressure rates and it was low for interior offensive lineman last year in college. So basically, and nobody was blowing up in his face getting pressure on the quarterback. Did a very good job at sensing on that. Colby from Iowa is another one that kind of comes in the mix. Centers, Manheim. Wilson from Georgia seems to be one of the top centers they're looking at. Majors from Texas, McLaughlin from Ohio State, but they all seem right now kind of in a projected as a 4, 5, 6 type round guys, whatever that means. But for the Saints, coming back in on the Sunday or the third day portion of the draft, I should say, we don't have a 5, but 6 and 7. I wouldn't be opposed to adding one of those centers in there and go, let's try to have an understudy for McCoy and see if we can make that happen. I think it's definitely worth the conversation for the Saints on their draft board. So that's kind of wrapping up the breakdown of the combine. Hopefully kind of gives you a starting point that if you choose to watch it, I'll have it on the TV, but I don't really watch it because I think it's mostly eye candy, but I think it's kind of the stuff that's coming out. Today's Friday. We're getting some information on what happened yesterday with the linebackers and the defensive linemen. Progressively every day, we'll get a little more insight to what's happening, and I think that kind of can point us in the direction of who did well, who didn't, who may actually be piquing the Saints' interest to help out in the spots we need to help out with. And then you couple that over the next couple of weeks with, announcements like we're bringing Carr back and whatever else we're going to be doing with the veterans, the restructures, the contracts. They want to try to get in the free agency, what they do there. That's how all the shaping comes around to. So roughly March 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, when all that's done through free agency and the league is started. Now we know what we learn in the combine. How can we apply it to kind of what the Saints are thinking and possibly could be doing. So, bit of bad news. I kept saying we're going to try to go live Monday to talk about this. Let's push that back to Ash Wednesday. And I just realized, somebody told me last night, it's like, you do realize Monday's the day before Mardi Gras, and down here, that would just be, it's probably not even worth trying to do it then. So let's push it back to Wednesday. Plus, that'll give us an opportunity see a little more what information has come out post-combine. And we'll probably be getting close to that point to get some real information coming from the Saints front office about what the plans are over the next roughly 2 weeks to get ready for when the league opens March 12th. So till I see you next time, and I should be seeing you live on Wednesday, I'm Tim. Peace out and hoot at.